All right, Steve, you're on. Go ahead.
Speedy Tywan Claxton, how are you doing today, sir? This is Steve Jewin from MMA Mania.
Pretty good. How are you?
I'm good. I really enjoyed your last fight that I saw at Bellator 204 in Sioux Falls, and of course, after that fight, we had a chance to talk, and first question was that Fortnite dance. How much have you been getting asked about that since that fight?
A lot of people, a lot of my youth wrestlers and the wrestlers at the high school that I'm coaching at, all asked me the question, what was going through your head, and I drilled it. I kind of was like, oh, I'll hit him with the Fortnite dance and make him get up because I knew he was on a butt scoot, and it just kind of came out. What you practice is what you're going to do. So I did it joking around in practice, and it kind of just manifested itself and became a real life thing.
After I went home that weekend, I fired up Fortnite on the Switch. I got caught in the acid rain, and my character was slowly dying, and I was scooting along on my backside, and I was like, okay, where's Tywan Claxton now when I need him?
Hey, Steve, I'm gonna jump in real quickly. Tywan, feel free to break the news to Steve here who your opponent is and all that information.
All right, well,
okay, solid.
As Dan told me before the call, you had a change of opponent, so who is your new opponent here for Bellator 212?
My new opponent is Kyle Meyer. He is a 155-pounder, and he's a local Hawaiian. And he agreed to fight on a couple weeks' notice. I agreed to fight him on a couple weeks' notice, and we'll be fighting at a catch weight of 150.
So you're not too worried about him missing weight like Chris Lencioni did?
Well, he'll probably, it kind of is what it is. It's he took it on 2 weeks' notice. I took it on 2 weeks' notice, so we agreed to to that catch weight of 150. I wasn't worried about Lencioni missing weight, and he missed weight, and we knew we were fighting for 4 or 5 weeks. You know what I mean? So, you give a guy 2 weeks. That Hawaiian culture, I think he'll man up and make weight just like I have to man up and make weight in 2 weeks. So it's a little different. He's coming down from 155, so he'll be naturally bigger, and I don't have to cut as much, get down to 45. So the catch weight of 150, I feel like for both of us, fight on, like I said, on 2 weeks' notice. And, I think that's a fair weight, 150. And, I think he'll man up and make it, and I'll make it. So we'll get after it.
Well, I have 2 takeaways from that announcement. First is he wouldn't want to embarrass himself as a native Hawaiian fighting in Honolulu missing weight. So I think the pressure will definitely be on him. And the second takeaway is he might be bigger, but I think you'll be a lot faster.
I think I'll be a lot faster as well. There's levels to speed. They didn't call me Speedy before I became Air Claxton for nothing. So, I train with bigger guys all the time. I wrestle with bigger guys. I strike with bigger boxers, bigger kickboxers, things of that nature. So, the weight doesn't really matter to me that much. But again, I am a 145 pounder for a reason. I wrestled 49 in college and was a little undersized, and 45 is just the right weight class for me. So he'll have a little suck, but I'll definitely have some speed. So it'll be an interesting matchup for sure.
We've seen some guys lately bouncing between 135 and 145. Caldwell, who was also on that card with you in Sioux Falls. What do you think about this? Could you go up to lightweight, or would that be too much for you?
Well, you'll never hear me say something is too much for me. That just ain't in my character to admit that. But if the incentives have to be right, the money has to be right, and the fight has to be right. But I fight 145. I walk around at 159. So for me to fight 145 or 155 is 4 pounds. Most of those guys are cutting from 185. So, like I said, the matchup would have to be right. And even if the matchup wasn't right, the money would have to be right. You can only fight for so long. So, preserving your body and your brain cells is the most important thing.
Oh, I agree. In fact, that's one of the concerns about weight cutting in general, and it goes even all the way back to wrestling in the high school days and the college days, is that if you cut too much weight and you're dehydrated when you go in there for a match, that's when you can get concussions and injuries. So do you ever think we're going to reach a sport where we have natural weights, or do you think it's just always going to be weight cutting from now on?
There's always going to be weight cutting because people are competitive. You know, if you can get down to a certain weight, then, you know, you're going to want to fight at that weight if it gives you an advantage. And, you know, no matter how well you cut weight, et cetera, how well your diet is, dehydration is a part of the weight cut. And I think that what it comes down to is understanding how to cut weight, understanding the value of nutrition, understanding how much you can lift, what type of lifts you can do so that your muscle mass isn't too much, you know, things of that nature, and then understanding how to properly dehydrate yourself and then how to properly hydrate yourself back up. I think that the problem right now is that a lot of people are cutting weight, but they don't honestly know how to cut weight the right way. And, you know, I've had years and years of practice from wrestling of cutting weight, and, you know, I've done it the wrong way. I've wrestled 125 every weekend on a Friday, and then on Sunday I'm 160, and then come Monday I have to cut all the way back down. So it's I think it's a learning curve, and you know, cutting weight is always going to be a part of the sport. No matter if they try to ban people from cutting weight or not, people are going to do it, you know. And I think that, you know, at the end it only really affects the person that's cutting the weight, and it really only affects their body. So you know, I kind of have like mixed emotions about that, because I just think that for a commission to tell a fighter they can't cut any more weight or things like that, at the end of the day, no commission, you know, no organization is losing brain cells, and that's what it comes down to. It's all about the brain cells in the body. You know, just like you can't tell a woman what to do with her body, you can't tell a fighter how much weight he can cut or how he should be able to cut it, et cetera, et cetera. You know, I just think that it's up to that fighter and that fighter's camp to make sure that they have a proper weight cut, they're doing it the right way, and it works in their favor. You know what I mean?
I do, and I hope this doesn't seem argumentative in response, but I feel like Cynthia Calvillo was a case where somebody should have actually said to her, stop cutting weight, you're dying, you're gonna die, this is not acceptable, you're done.
I think that person should have been, I agree with you, but I think that person should have been somebody in her team. You know, you should have had a coach tell you, you know, just like you would have a coach throw a towel in for you, you should have a coach telling you, I think we should stop cutting weight at this point.
So it's really then not up to the commissions in your view, it's up to the fighters' camp and the people around them and their coaches to say, this is not a good weight class for you.
Absolutely. And if you don't have those people around you, then you're in the wrong camp, and you got the wrong coaches.
Well, speaking of camps, let's talk about yours for this fight here coming up at Bellator 212. Who have you put together to get you ready for this last-minute change of opponent?
So, I always have my striking coach, Steve Tracek. He was my first ever striking coach, and actually, I don't know if you know the background story, but he actually canceled my first MMA fight. I walked into an MMA gym, was like, hey, I'm going to take a fight, and, you know, show me some shit. Those were my exact words. And he said, when are you fighting? I said, I'm fighting this weekend. I think we walked in on a Wednesday, and I was supposed to fight on that Saturday, and they canceled the fight. He said, you can wrestle, but you can't throw a punch for shit. So it's been good being back in Ohio and having him full time. We work 3 days a week, whether I have a fight coming up or not. I get a lot of private time with him. So, you know, it's good to have him in my corner. I have my jiu-jitsu coach, Shannon White, who just opened up his own BJJ school, and I'm rolling with guys that pretty much I'm the only white belt in there. I like to say that I'm a no-gi black belt, though, because I'm not putting on a gi. But, yeah, I have him, and I roll with all top-notch jiu-jitsu guys. You know, I got Chris Kriebel, Josh Roller. All these guys are competing at a high level and beating some high-level guys. And then, you know, for my wrestling, I've been wrestling with guys that I wrestled with in high school, guys that I've met in college in wrestling, and I'm in Northeast Ohio, so it's it's a hotbed for wrestling. So I've been staying sharp. And then once I got a change of opponent, or didn't know that I was going to have an opponent, I flew Neil Melanson in, who was my ground coach, and I worked on some tactics and stuff like that, and that's kind of the camp that I put together for myself for this fight, and has pretty much been the camp that I've had all of my professional fights. So at one point in time, I might have had one coach and didn't have the other, but all the guys that I kind of started with are the same guys that I've been riding with.
Well, it sounds like a very excellent team, and obviously it has worked for you so far. But I do want to ask you a question about the jiu-jitsu, because so far we've seen your flying knee, and we've seen your hand speed, and we've seen you out-wrestle people, but we have yet to see you get a submission in Bellator. Is that on your bucket list?
If it comes, it comes. My goal is to finish. I'm looking for the finish. So whether it's by strikes or submission, I'm happy with either one, but I'm happy with a finish. So if it presents itself, yes, I'll go for a submission, but I prefer to do damage over trying to submit somebody, because at the end of the day, fans love to see the violence. And if you take a guy down and all you do is, hold tight and try to, pass guard traditional ways and, look for submissions traditional ways. And if you can't get it, say the guy is just good at holding on and not letting you do anything, then it becomes a very boring fight, and I try to stay away from that. So, like I said, if a submission presents itself, I'll go for it, but I will never give up position for a submission, meaning that I will never get from on top of you to go for an armbar. I will never, like I said, I will never give up position for a submission. And so if I see it, I'll go for it, but it has to be the right situation, and I'd rather do damage than look for a submission. So, it's on the bucket list. So you could say that. We'll put it on the bucket list. We'll get one of them before we end this fight career of ours.
All right. Well, then if I can bottom line it, you're going to look for a flying knee before a flying guillotine.
Absolutely.
All right. One last question before I let you go, Tywan. Since you've only had this short amount of time to learn about your opponent for Bellator 212, is there any scouting you can do, or do you just rely on the strength of your camp and not worry about what kind of fighter he is?
Well, I looked at one of his fights. He fought 3 or 4 times this year. None of them are online. And the only fight that was online was a couple amateur fights. So, with that being said, I am going to rely on the strength of what I've been doing, and, trust in myself. At the end of the day, my game plan doesn't change. It doesn't matter who my opponent is. My goal is to go out there and impose my will on them. And that's exactly what I want to do, December 14th in Hawaii. Whether he decides to stand orthodox, whether he decides to stand southpaw, whether he decides to sit back and fight from the open, whether he decides to crowd me, whether he decides to grapple, whether he decides to strike. It doesn't matter what he's going to do, because I will impose my will on him once that cage door closes. And that's my game plan for every single person.
And then you'll celebrate afterwards with a Fortnite dance, right?
We'll try to get another dance. Maybe not Fortnite this time. We'll see.
Well, you can always do PUBG, too. I'm sure there's some good taunts you can copy from that.
Absolutely.
All right, Tywan, please give some plugs, some shout-outs, anything you'd like to give before we wrap it up.
Yeah, absolutely. I want to give a shout-out to my training partners, all of my training partners. I want to give a shout-out to my new gym, Warehouse Warriors, and everybody that's been a part of it. All the fighters that come through for sparring, all the fighters that come through for technique. Want to give a shout out to all my jiu-jitsu guys that come up and allow me to hit them in the face, even though they only do jiu-jitsu. And, I want to give a shout out to all the boxers that come, the Rodriguez, boys. Big shout out to Rodriguez Boxing Ohio for, coming out and helping me, my boy Armand, Ahmad, all of those guys, and of course my brother Brian Doogie Hauser, who's my main drill partner and always there. Big shout out to all you guys, and it's time to put in work.
Yes, indeed. And everybody follow Tywan Claxton on Twitter at TClax149, and you're going to get to see some spectacular replays of highlight reel finishes. I guarantee he's a man to watch. Thank you, Tywan. I appreciate the time.
Thank you.